The Chook Whisperer by Jennifer Grinlinton of Long Beach, 2536. Narrated by Janine Penfold. He was gone. A tear rolled down Molly's cheek and dripped onto her hand. She stared at it, glistening in the lamplight. She hadn't cried in years. Her damp hair hung limp down her back, more silver than brown. She pushed the sleeves of her nightgown up as far as they would go and hitched the hem above her knees, hoping to catch a breeze. She was crying for herself, not him. The pendulum on the grandfather clock swung back and forth, marking time, as the day ebbed away. She wouldn't miss him. Jeff was the sole policeman in the tiny village. He coached the under-15s footy team and raised chickens. Everyone said he had a way with chooks and called him the Chook Whisperer. Happy to help others with their problem chooks, the villagers thought he was a good bloke. At home, he was self-centred, arrogant and demanding. The good times gave her hope and kept her there. The pain and sadness made her want to run, but shame and guilt weighed her down. It had been good at the start. He was tall, good-looking, and the life of the party. He loved to dance, made her laugh, held her hand, and kissed her at night under the willow tree beside the river. Young, naive, and vulnerable, she believed it was love. When Jeff asked her parents' permission to marry her, he was greeted with handshaking and backslapping. It wasn't long before they tied the knot and moved into their own cottage. Life became an endless round of thankless chores caring for her husband and their 3 young children. She fell into bed, exhausted. Jeff came home late, smelling of beer, crawled into bed, pulled her to him, and pushed up her nightgown. Molly's no fell on deaf ears. If she pushed him away, he was rough. If she refused, he would slap her or take to her with his belt. She learned to keep quiet. The sooner he was finished, the better, and she was grateful no more babies arrived. Bruises came and went. She was grateful there were no broken bones. Her parents had moved away, and friends rarely came to call. She kept away from people, terrified they would see and learn the truth. Women in her family were hardened by trauma and stoic by nature. To remind herself of her strength, she often ran her hand over the notches she'd made on the architrave inside the pantry door, one for each beating. Sometimes Jeff came home smelling of perfume, a spring in his step. He'd fall into bed and go straight to sleep. Molly wished this happened more often. Over the years, the village grew into a town. Jeff was in charge of the expanded police force and was respected by the community. With the children grown and gone, he hardly spoke to her. He came home from work, changed, collected the eggs, chatted to the chooks, and stroked each one before he came in for his evening meal. Afterwards he read the paper, sometimes muttered about work, and fell into bed, no longer interested in his husbandly dues. On weekends, he spent time helping other people with their chooks, at the football matches or catching up with mates at the pub. Every morning, Molly took the kitchen scraps to the chooks. They followed her along the fence line, chortling to themselves, beady eyes in search of food, their feathers fluffed out. She threw the contents of the bucket into the yard, topped up their water, and closed the gate. She was grateful for the eggs, but despised the chooks almost as much as she did Jeff. Now Molly watched the full moon rise through the window, the yard lit by the glow. The neighbours' lights were out. She stood, smoothed her nightgown, plaited her long hair, tied it at the end with a blue ribbon to match her eyes, and flicked it back over her shoulder. She pulled on her socks and boots, blew out the lamp, and made her way to the shed. Decades of keeping house and gardening had kept her fit for her age. She found the shovel and broom where she'd left them earlier in the day and balanced them across the mound of cloth in the wheelbarrow. She heaved it out into the yard, her muscles straining under the load. The wheel bounced over a tree root. A foot escaped the coverings. The police-issued boot, shiny from spit polishing, gleamed up at her in the moonlight. She shoved it back under the covers. Molly pushed the wheelbarrow to the far corner of the yard and laid the broom on the ground. Her heart thumped as she pushed the old wooden lid off the disused well with the shovel, being careful not to touch it. The wood screeched against the bricks as it slowly moved away. She scanned the neighbours' windows. No lights, no sign of movement. She wiped the sweat from her brow. The water below was stagnant, deep and cold after years of not being used. Molly carefully positioned the wheelbarrow wheel and slowly raised the handles. Using all her strength, fueled by her years of memories, she gave the barrow a final shove. There was a distant yet still deafening splash far below. Then silence. Molly stood still, her nerves taut. The only sound, a chook softly clucking. She picked up the shovel and levered the lid back into place. She brushed the wheel marks away from the well with the broom. She gazed at the halo around the moon, hoping it would rain before morning. She returned the barrow, shovel and broom to the shed and cleaned them with hot, soapy water. Inside the house, she took off her nightgown, washed herself with a cool flannel, put on a clean gown and lay down, the sheets cool against her skin. Tomorrow, she would report Jeff missing. The end.